And so I'm now recording, and before that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Zaira, and I'm the first year or interim first year experience coordinator here at DVC. And I am happy to introduce y'all to today's presenter for our workshop on proven, wait, it's a long name, but it's a good one. Proven STEM success strategies from real world engineers. So without further ado, go ahead and give a round of applause to our presenter, Ashley Erickson. Yeah, awesome. So Ashley, thank you. I see a couple of us joined. The floor is yours, Ashley.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you so much, Zaira, for helping put on this event. I think it's a really great thing that you're all here. And again, our goal is this session is for you, and we want this to be as helpful as possible. So please do shout out, type in the chat if questions come up. Zaira is going to be keeping an eye on the chat for us. And so if you do have questions that come up as we go through this stuff, please feel free to type those in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those as well. And so you'll see that on our slides here, I went ahead and I figured we could start out with just a couple questions here about, why are we here, right? Why are we interested in STEM in the first place? What do we find challenging? And what do we hope to learn from this session? So real quick, let's just pull up our Google Doc that we've been looking at here. And let's just see what everybody's been saying. And so question one, why are you interested in STEM? Well, looks like a lot of people are just have curiosity and interest in STEM. Lots of fun things you can do with STEM. So lots of people are interested for a degree. And so, it's very important to remember why we're here as we go through the challenges and the ups and downs of STEM. Question two, list things you find most challenging. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it's as mentioned in these chats, it can be challenging if you're kind of a minority in engineering or you're not one of the most common populations. Amount of time and money spent in school, I mean, that can definitely be a challenge as well. So certainly a challenging thing. Of course, STEM in itself is a very challenging field to study, right? And so there's lots of challenges that can pop up as we are studying and pursuing careers in STEM. So it's really important for us to think about, well, how can we be successful, right? What can we do to increase our chances of success? And then finally, thanks to those of you who managed to fill out the survey all the way to this point, but things to earn, or things that we're hoping to learn from today's session. I'm glad to see, how to get started, important tips. We're definitely going to be touching on all of these things that are listed here. And of course, if more questions come up as we go through our topics today, I'm more than happy to do my best to answer those as well. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's slides. So again, the goal of our session today is to talk about what strategies can we learn from real world engineers. And this is a fairly quick session, so we're not going to dive into too much detail on these various topics, but I'm hoping this will be a nice broad overview of different strategies that can work for you. So the goal is we want you to be able to recognize challenges that we face as students and professionals in STEM. And then I have a list of what I call 7 success strategies here, 7 success strategies. And these are basically some strategies and ideas I've come up with and read about and applied myself to help you succeed. And then finally, the goal here is ultimately that you identify some next steps that you can take in order to improve your chances for success. All right, and a couple other logistical things before we dive in. Please do stay muted unless you're asking a question. And of course, feel free to type in the chat if questions come up as we go through this. And if there's interest, these slides will be made available to those of you who are joining live, and we'll continue from there. All right, so real quick, who am I? So some of you may know me from classes you might have taken here at DVC. But for those of you who I have not yet met virtually or in person, my name is Ashley Erickson. I am an engineering assistant professor here at Diablo Valley College. I'm a Bay Area native. I'm a foodie. I'm a fan of all things nerdy. And on paper, I'm actually a chemical engineer. So I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in chemical engineering. And over the course of getting those degrees, I gained a background in biosensors and also expertise in optics, process engineering, manufacturing, and hardware. So kind of done all sorts of stuff. Engineering's taken me on a lot of adventures. And so I spent 6 years in engineering industry at various companies. And then finally, what I realized is that my passion really was teaching. And so I ultimately ended up here at DVC as an engineering assistant professor. All right. So really our question for today then is, how can we apply the strategies that real world engineers and real world STEM professionals use in order to be successful in STEM? And so before I dive into these strategies, I do want to share a quick disclaimer here. First of all, I am not pretending to be an expert or that I am perfect at following these strategies. You know, these challenges that we'll talk about are things that all of us face. And so it's one of those things where I myself am also working on applying these strategies. And so I'm certainly not a perfect expert shining example of using these strategies constantly, but I hope that by sharing these strategies with you, I can help everybody improve their success in STEM. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of strategies, and everybody's different, right? What works for me may or may not work for you, and vice versa. So make sure here, once again, we're sharing strategies that tend to work for many people, but everyone's unique. So take this information and figure out what works best for you. And again, my hope is that you will find these strategies helpful. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this talk. And first, let's just compare school and the real world, because one of the first things I noticed when I finished school and started engineering was that there are some big differences between school and the real world. And some of you who may have also spent time in the real world may know this as well. First thing, daily tasks. In school, you're given assignments, right? You have assignments, you have instructions, clear goals provided. But in the real world, you're going to be working on complex projects. And the next steps are often unclear, and sometimes there aren't even instructions at all. And you kind of just have to figure out how to do it yourself. So daily tasks, very different. How about your projects? You know, in school, typically your projects are maybe weeks to a few months in duration. Most of the time, you're not going longer than a full semester. And usually you succeed most of the time if you put in enough effort. But in the real world, projects can take years and failures can happen a lot, even if you're working really, really hard. So it's sort of a different environment in the real world compared to regular school. Another difference, solutions. You know, in school, when you're working on a homework set or working on an assignment, typically there's one right answer, right? You're trying to solve the problem and get the answer. But in the real world, sometimes there isn't a perfect solution. And often you'll find that sometimes you just have to agree with everyone on good enough and then hope that, you know, good enough is good enough, right? And so you'll find that in the real world, there's often never that perfect solution. And you just kind of have to figure out, well, what's good enough to meet my requirements, and off I go. How about your team? You know, in school, it's a very solitary thing, right? Like most of the time, you are the one doing your assignments. You might have a group project occasionally, but most of the time, you're completing your work alone. But in the real world, you've got constant teamwork happening. And 99% of the time, you are not going to be building every single part of your product. You're going to be relying on other people to help you get the job done. So most of the work is actually done in teams. And work-life balance, this is a big one. I think all of us here, you know, right now it's week 12 of our semester. Everybody's tired, right? So I think many people here can comment that unfortunately for those of us in school, work-life balance can often be very poor, right? There's lots of classes, lots of work. It's a very challenging time as a student. And even in the real world, it can be challenging. And so work-life balance really varies, and ultimately you have to manage it yourself. You need to figure out, okay, how much work am I willing to do? How much personal time do I need for myself? And everybody has their own optimal balance for that. So another difference. Then finally, success. This is an interesting one. You know, in school, success is kind of one size fits all, right? Like whoever gets the most points, they're, you know, considered more successful. It's kind of like this one size fits most approach, right? Like if you get good points and high grades, then, that's considered successful on paper in school. But in the real world, it might be a little different, right? From person to person, everybody has their own definition of success, but it's typically measured by what results you achieve. Another really interesting one, your time. As a student, often your time is very structured. You have this structured class schedule. Typically you have class at certain times, maybe you have to go to work at other times. There's a lot of structure to your day. But once you go to the real world, you'll find that you actually have to manage your time. And maybe there will be certain meetings you need to go to, but often you kind of need to plan and manage and figure out when you're going to do all the different tasks on your list. So it becomes much more managed by you and much less managed by when your class happens to be meeting. And then finally, the last one, your boss. So, when you're in school, typically your boss is basically yourself and your instructors, right? Like you're holding yourself accountable to a certain standard that you're trying to reach. And generally, your instructors, hopefully most instructors will care about you. They generally want you to succeed in their class and they want to help you and they want to point you in the right direction if you're struggling. But in the real world, you'll have a manager, but your manager is often focused more on results than on you personally. And, depending on the manager, it may vary, but, it's a little bit different. It's a different type of setting. So as you can see from school versus real world, there are some differences here. And what makes you successful in school may or may not necessarily be the same skills that make you successful in the real world. But what I would like to make the argument here is that strategies that are useful in engineering industry can also be useful to school and kind of life in general. And so that's sort of how I came up with this list here. And I think many people will find this first bullet to be a little bit, nice to hear, that, not knowing stuff, failure, fear, ambiguity, uncertainty, these are really uncomfortable feelings. But in the real world, these are kind of normal. There's always going to be that uncertainty. There's always going to be things that are maybe not perfect, not 100% correct. And you're going to need to know how to overcome these obstacles. Also, in the real world, people don't usually hold your hand, right? People aren't necessarily going to be checking in on you, seeing how you're doing. You kind of have to manage your own success and well-being. And you also have to be willing and able to ask for help, even if it might be a little bit uncomfortable. You have to be able to say, you know what, I need some help with this. Really important bullet here, this third one. This comes up a lot. Your boss and your team, they're probably not going to accept I failed or I don't know as an answer. It's always kind of disappointing to me as a professor when I see students submit work and sometimes a student will submit a homework assignment and instead of, answering the question, they'll just flat out write, I don't know, or I wasn't sure how to solve this, so I tried this. And it's like, well, why didn't you ask? Like, why didn't you reach out for help? Why didn't you try to find a solution or at least make an attempt at the problem? And so it's one of these very important things that you want to get in the habit of doing is you never want to say, I don't know. You always want to try to find some sort of solution. Well, worst case, ask for help, make a plan, try to find a way to move forward. Next one, really important. This second to last bullet here, you need to create your own definition of success and work toward it. In school, points and grades might be one measure of success, but at the end of the day, you have to do what will make you most happy and most successful. And so knowing what you want and having a plan, that's really key. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then finally, this very last bullet, I think as students, we get so wrapped up in the semester, we sometimes just lose sight of, what happens after we graduate and what happens after class ends and the exam is over. And there's much more to life than just work and school and STEM. And it's important to also make sure you have that life and that meaning outside of work. And whatever that means for you, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's other things outside of STEM, it's important to have that. And it helps just keep you sane as you go through these challenges. All right, I'll pause a moment just in case there's any questions, and then let's go ahead and continue. Are there any questions in the chat?
No questions at the moment.
All righty, I see thumbs up. Let's go ahead and continue on. So I'd like to present to you these 7 strategies here. I was trying to come up with a nice sort of concise list of things that we can do that will help us succeed in STEM. And these are strategies that work both for the engineering industry as well as for people who are students. And so we're going to go through these strategies one by one. So I'm just presenting to you the full list here, and then we'll go through each of these in more detail in the next few slides. But I'd like to once again emphasize this little disclaimer down here, my asterisk. These are gathered from my own personal experience. I'm not claiming to be an expert on these and how to succeed in STEM. I think we all go through our challenges. These are ideas. So please take them for what they're worth and figure out what works best for you and see if you can apply some of these strategies to help increase your success. So the 7 strategies are, first one, imagine who you could be and work toward becoming that person. So really envisioning who you want to be, envisioning what your goal is for yourself and for your career in STEM. Second one, I can't emphasize this one enough. This one is so important. Seek mentors and positive groups. Nobody said you have to do STEM alone. And so if you find others who help support you and inspire you and encourage you and help push you to be a better person, this can be a huge benefit. And this will really keep you going as you go through the ups and downs of STEM and life in general, right? Third one, plan and manage your time. This is so important to success. And many students often struggle because in part, they do not plan and manage their time well enough. One principal engineer I worked with once told me that you should manage your time like you manage your money. You want to be very mindful of what you spend your time on because, at the end of the day, we all have the same amount of time and it's how we choose to use it, right? And number 4, get comfortable outside your comfort zone. This is huge. And again, being in STEM, there's just going to be times when you are in situations where you don't know, where maybe you're in a tense meeting, maybe you have to do something for the first time and you're not quite sure how it will work. There's going to be times when you want to, you need to be outside your comfort zone. And so we'll talk about how we can do that. Number 5, this is also one of my favorites. Embrace a growth mindset. So we'll talk about what this means more. Basically, this means rather than seeing failures as failures, seeing struggles and challenges as opportunities for growth and seeing how we can solve problems, not instead of viewing problems negatively, viewing them in a positive light. And finally, we'll end with trusted problem-solving strategies. So we'll go through a couple of problem-solving techniques that are especially useful in engineering. And finally, we'll end on the last one, enjoy the journey, right? At the end of the day, we wouldn't be doing STEM if there wasn't some redeeming quality, something fun and interesting about it. And so we want to make sure that we also enjoy our adventure, even if it is not necessarily, unicorns and happy faces and rainbows the whole time. All right. So there's our list of 7 strategies. Let's go ahead and dive into each one. So feel free to shout out, type in the chat if questions come up as we go through these, and we'll get going. So first one, imagine who you could be and work toward becoming that person. And so this is why we had those questions at the beginning of the session about, why STEM and how do you define success? And I encourage you to really think about these questions because it's really helpful to have this sustaining meaning. Basically when we say sustaining meaning, you need something that is going to help you stay motivated and stay excited about STEM, even though there's going to be times when it just absolutely sucks to be working on STEM. You need to have a strong why and a strong motivation in order to power through it. So definitely make sure you think about these questions and remind yourself of your answers regularly, especially during those times, week 12 of the semester when you're tired and you're thinking, oh man, is it winter break yet? That's when you want to remind yourself of these things. So next one, this one is really important. This is a really interesting question. This actually comes from Tony Robbins. I don't know if some of you have heard of him. Really excellent career coach, personal success coach. And he likes to ask this question. What kind of person do you need to become in order to achieve the success you want? Everybody can say that they want to become a scientist or an engineer, or they want to go to medical school, or they want to do, cure cancer, save the world, whatever it is. But, what kind of person do you have to become in order to do that? If you probably need to have some confidence, you need to have motivation, you need to have organizational skills, you need to be able to work with a team. There's a lot of skills, both soft skills and technical skills that you need to develop in order to, reach that goal. So it's a good question to think about. And especially when we're going through our ups and downs in the semester, it's very important to remember, these challenges, yes, they're difficult, but by persevering, powering through it, we can potentially set ourselves up for success in the future and gain valuable skills and knowledge. So really key takeaway here, make sure you have a strong why to sustain you through the challenges of STEM. Make sure you use these questions and goals to help you, stay motivated, even though STEM can be really challenging. All right. So let's move on to number 2. This one, I can't emphasize enough how important mentors and positive groups are to your success in STEM. So you may have heard the saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose your 5 people carefully. This is absolutely true. And, do you want to spend time with people who kind of drain you and tire you out and who are not positive to be around? Or do you want to spend time with people who energize you and get you excited about things and maybe motivate you to work harder? And so choose those 5 people carefully, right? And so I highly recommend you surround yourself with mentors, friends, classmates, family members, others who can support and encourage you. And I realize this is especially challenging during the pandemic, right? Like we're still, sometimes isolated, we're not fully back on ground, but really, really important. Find those people, and if you don't yet have 5 people, keep looking, see if you can find more. Maybe there's a student organization, maybe there's a professional organization, maybe there's some extracurricular groups. Find those people that can help support and encourage you. And don't be afraid to go to these people either when you need help, right? Because that's what they're there for. And chances are people are probably very happy to listen. The good friends, good family members, and others who care, hopefully they will be able to provide you some support and encouragement when you need it. So a little bit more on that, importance of having mentors. So believe it or not, I can tell you from my own personal experience, as well as others I've known, successful STEM professionals have mentors throughout their careers, but especially at the beginning. So if you do not already have some mentor who you've been talking with to help guide you through STEM and provide you some encouragement, I highly recommend that you try to seek out a mentor. They can just be incredibly helpful. I credit most of my success, my ability to do a PhD and to work in engineering industry, come to DVC. All of this was in no small part due to the fact that I had excellent mentors helping me along the way. Mentors can help you plan and pursue your goals. They can give you encouragement, constructive, honest feedback. This is really, really important, right? They can help you learn and grow new skills. They can help connect you to other people. They can basically be that voice that you need to hear. Sometimes you just need to hear that voice that says, no, you know what? You are very smart. You are very capable. You can do this. You need to keep at it. Here's some feedback. This is where I think you can improve. You need to have these mentors. And the good news is DVC actually does have mentoring programs available. So if you are not already in them, or if you have not already looked at them, try taking advantage of them. And even if you don't want to meet with somebody directly through those programs, you'll find that often people are very happy to share advice and meet with you. I even tell my students this, during class. I'm like, yeah, if you want to come to office hours, we don't have to just talk about circuits. Like we can also talk about career stuff too. And very often people, especially when they're done being students and they're in the real world, they love to help other students succeed. So take advantage of mentors. All right. So questions before we move on to our third point? Just double check the chat here. It's like no questions so far. All right, so moving on to our third point, planning and managing your time. So this is a key to success. Remember, we all have the same amount of time every day, right? 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And at the end of the day, it's how we use that time. And one of the first things I recommend to students, if they come talk to me and they're like, hey, I'm really interested in STEM, I'm not sure where to go next. One of the first things I recommend is to make and maintain a 5-year plan. This has helped me personally tremendously. It's helped many of my friends tremendously. And I'm very confident that if you put together this 5-year plan, it will also help you. And so the idea here is to not limit yourself just to career and school, but to also think about, personal goals, right? What do you want for yourself, in 5 years, right? What do you want for your education? What do you want for, fun and adventure, right? Like, you can't work all the time. Are there places you want to go, things you want to do? And also giving back, right? So basically the idea is you want to make and maintain this plan, helping you keep track of all the goals and where you want to be in 5 years. And most importantly, your plan should include daily, weekly, and monthly tasks that you will do to help you achieve these goals. And so we don't have a ton of time to go into this. I mean, I could spend a whole session on 5-year plans, but I did put a template in these presentation slides. This is based on one that I give my intro to engineering students. So I encourage you, if you're curious, if you have not made a 5-year plan before, this is such an important tool. I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is both to succeeding in STEM as well as just life in general. And a little bit more on goals, right? Time management is key. And basically, at the end of the day, our goal is to really work towards some final results, right? We want to try to, finish products. We want to get degrees. We want to succeed. We want to build things. We want to basically set goals. And so we could spend an entire session just talking about goal setting. The short version is if you are setting goals, making your 5-year plan, you want to use what's called SMART goals. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So notice how this really makes a goal a lot more specific, a lot more targeted, and it makes it very easy to tell whether or not you have achieved that goal. So one example of this, suppose you wanted to improve time management, right? So you could just simply write, I want to improve time management. Right? But what does that mean? Like, how do you know whether you've gotten better at it? Like, how do you know how much do you want to improve it by? Right? Like, how do you know whether you've improved or not? Like, this is not very specific. But what if instead of I want to improve time management, you say every Sunday evening, I will set aside 30 minutes to make a daily plan for the week, and I'm going to schedule specific times to complete schoolwork, other obligations, and required tasks. I mean, that's a pretty specific goal, right? That means every Sunday evening, you're going to be spending that 30 minutes, you're going to be making a plan, and you are going to make sure that you have scheduled time to complete all of your tasks. Which of these goals do you think you're more likely to complete? This one up here or this one down here? And so that's kind of where we're going when we say SMART goals. The idea is if you write very specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals, it's a lot easier to know whether you're on track to achieve them, and a lot easier to measure your success when you do achieve that goal. All right. So a little bit more on time management. Again, we can spend an entire session on time management, so I don't want to drag on for too long. But I've just listed some ideas here that are worth thinking about, because really succeeding in STEM, succeeding in your challenging classes, it really is important to know how to manage your time. And so some ideas, keeping a daily routine. Research shows this helps you save willpower and is really helpful for efficiency. Learning to say no. This is a big one. I'm terrible at this. But you have to be a little bit selfish sometimes. And if something is not directly going to benefit you, if you just don't have time to do something, sometimes you do have to learn to say no. Study strategies. This is a really big one. A lot of students in STEM try to get by just reading and memorizing, but you'll find a lot of our STEM classes, they're no joke. You can't just memorize your way through it. And so one of the best ways to study in STEM is not to read or to watch lecture videos. It's to actually do, right? Don't read, but do. If it's a programming class, write programs. If it's like a physics class, solve practice problems. You don't want to just sit there and read. You want to actually physically solve the problems. Do the thing that you're going to be tested on. Maintain a to-do list and calendar, very helpful. Making a weekly plan ahead of time, also really, really important. Fun and recovery time, right? Really easy to forget about this when we're students and we're swamped, but super important to recharge that willpower and make sure that you don't burn out. Set reasonable goals and leave some buffer, right? Don't assume you're going to be able to work 16 hours a day every day for the entire semester. You got to give yourself a little bit of buffer time. And finally, learn project management skills. Really good if you have big projects you're working on, break them into smaller tasks so you don't save it all for the end. Finally, this last point here, this is really important. I think a lot of students don't necessarily realize that there is an official definition for number of units that your course is worth. Like, if you're taking a 4-unit class or a 1-unit class, by definition, a 1-unit college class, by definition, is 3 hours of work per week. And that could be lecture time, study time, whatever time. But that means if you're taking a 4-unit class, if you want to be successful in that 4-unit class, that means on average, you're going to need to spend 12 hours a week just on that one class. And, many of us take a lot more than one 4-unit class, right? And many students also work in addition to taking classes. And so it's tough to see as a professor now. Many students come in and they're doing their best to keep up with the classes. And it's not that the students themselves are bad, but if you overload yourself and you just don't physically have time, it's going to be very difficult to succeed. And so this is a very important thing to keep in mind as you're scheduling your classes and making a plan for yourself is, if a 4-unit class requires about 12 hours of work per week, how many of those can you comfortably fit in your schedule? And if you're like me personally, I struggled in math. And so I always needed a little bit more time in math in order to really master the material. And so if it were me, and if I knew I had to take a calculus class, I might want to give myself a little bit more than 12 hours a week in that class if I knew that that was one that I found particularly difficult. All right. Questions on time management before we move on? I'll just check the chat here. Looks like we are good. Okie doke. So next one, we mentioned this one earlier, get comfortable outside your comfort zone. And I think this is a really important point to bring up right here. In school, social media, and in today's culture, we often only see the perfect and polished side of STEM. You see the finished result when somebody has completed their project, or you see the finished result when somebody gets an A on their exam. And you don't necessarily see all the time and effort that was put in behind the scenes in order to achieve that result. And it's unfortunate because I think our culture frowns upon struggling and making mistakes, and instead we focus only on results and not on the journey. And these are two of my favorite quotes down here about experience. One of them, experience is the name everyone gives to their mistakes. And the second one is funny, right? Mistakes are embarrassing when they happen, but years later, you have a collection of mistakes called experience. I mean, this is 100% true. And of course, you don't want to just go around blindly making mistakes and not knowing what you're doing. You want to be very, conscious about your efforts. But this is a really important thing to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, you want to be able to recover from your mistakes and learn from them because at the end of the day, that's how we get experience. So let's think on this a little bit more. And so I like to emphasize that uncertainty, discomfort, stress, lack of confidence, these things are real. And if you're feeling these as a STEM student, you are definitely not alone. And this is why it's so important to have mentors and people able to help you through when you're feeling, stressed and challenged and uncomfortable. And so it's also important to learn how to succeed in these conditions. So I've listed a few ideas on this slide that are worth thinking about. First one, if you're confronted with failure, well, identify what you can learn. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we cover growth mindset. Second one, lacking confidence. I used to be terrified. And I remember I was talking to one of my mentors when I was an engineer. And you know what she told me to do? She's like, well, you're not feeling confident? Just fake it. And believe it or not, she told me that she actually, when she started out, she did the same thing. She was not feeling confident. Well, she just walked right into that meeting, walked right into that uncomfortable situation, and she did the job. And so the first way to build confidence is to put yourself in these slightly uncomfortable situations and see that, yes, you can be successful, even if it's maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone. And you may not be able to see it on people's faces, but others might be, afraid too. And they might not even be showing it or admitting it, but you might not be the only one who's feeling that way. Feeling anxious, gratitude and mindfulness are really, really powerful. And I encourage you, if you have considered any of those, gratitude, meditation, mindfulness can be extremely helpful. And not sure what to do, if you're stuck, do research, be resourceful. And really, I can't emphasize enough, don't be afraid to ask for help. And finally, last item here, make sure if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, break things down into manageable pieces. At the end of the day, if you have smaller tasks, it's a lot less intimidating. And also, that's where mentors and friends come in, right? Vent to a trusted friend or mentor and be kind to yourself, right? All right. Looks like we are good. No questions so far. So let's move on to our fifth item here, and that is embrace a growth mindset. So some of you may have heard this term before. I think it's a really powerful term that we really want to make sure everybody understands here. Growth mindset is the belief that you can cultivate and improve upon your abilities through practice and effort. Compare that with fixed mindset. Fixed mindset dictates that a student's ability is largely predetermined and unchangeable. And so we do see this a lot in teaching, where sometimes students often do find themselves in this fixed mindset. They'll just be like, well, STEM's not for me. I'm not good at math. I'm just going to give up. I'm going to go home. And so there's things we can do to help ourselves recognize when we're thinking with a fixed mindset and change the way we think to a growth mindset. And this can actually be incredibly powerful. So let's just go through a couple examples. First example, fixed mindset. I don't know how to do something. Growth mindset, how can I learn? Right? It's not focusing on what you don't have, but what you could do. Like, I'm not good at this. Like, I personally, math was not my strong subject, and I had to work harder at it than most people. And, the question to ask yourself then is, well, how can I improve? What am I missing? Is there something I can be doing better? How can I improve? You might think, oh, that person's smarter than me. Well, what can you learn from that person, right? Maybe they're doing something, they're using a different approach. Why do I keep messing up? That's always a painful question. How about, how can I learn from this? I don't have time. Well, how can I make time? This is too difficult. Well, with practice, maybe it can get easier. I give up. Well, how can I find another way? Or worst case, all of us unfortunately probably will at some point take a class that is, non-ideal, and this class is terrible. Well, there still must be something that you can learn, even if it's terrible, right? So these are just some examples. And really the goal here with growth mindset is that you really want to recognize when you're feeling through a fixed mindset. It happens to all of us, right? We wake up in the morning and it's like, oh man, I don't want to get up today. It's cold. I wish I could just curl up and go back to sleep, right? These are those negative beliefs that are just like, oh man, I'm not good at this. This is too hard. When you're sort of opposed to change and uncertainty, you don't want to take risks, right? You prefer to avoid pain. I might as well not attempt that problem because I'm just going to get it wrong. Belief that skills and intellect cannot change. These are all fixed mindset thinking. So the key here is that you want to, instead of thinking with a fixed mindset, you want to try to catch yourself when you're thinking with a fixed mindset and replace those thoughts with a growth mindset instead. So for example, if you say, I can't do something, you instead say, well, how can I do that? Or, if you can't do something, then add yet at the end, right? Well, I can't do it yet, but I'm going to learn. And so, that's the idea here is you're open to new approaches, new ideas, and you focus on the fact that, all of us had to start somewhere, right? You're not born with the ability to do calculus. Everybody had to start somewhere. So a couple quick examples. So another one, this is one of my big pet peeves, and I see this at students. I try to get them out of that fixed mindset, but I don't know how to do this. I give up. I'll leave this question blank. Now that makes me so sad. It's like, how about you don't know this yet? What do you know? How can you figure this out? You want to stop by office hours and discuss it together. What can you learn? And so the idea here is, rather than I don't know, I give up. Well, how can I figure this out? Another good example. Computer programming, electronics aren't for me. They don't make any sense. And yeah, they don't make any sense to anybody in the beginning, right? But if you don't try, you've already failed. With time and effort, I could succeed. So the idea here is to change the way you think about challenges and uncomfortable situations, and instead think about, well, how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And then one last quote here. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but basically, this is a nice quote from Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And he's giving an analogy here about problems being like weeds in the garden. And he makes some comment, I encourage you to read this whole thing. It's really good. But he says, I promise you one thing, there will be more weeds that continue to come up. They keep you vigorous, they keep you strong, they keep you vigilant in noticing what needs to be done to keep the garden of your life healthy and rich. We need to practice the same approach in weeding the gardens of our minds. So, basically accepting that, nothing's ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be issues here and there that pop up. But if we can learn from them and grow from them and use these things to improve ourselves, then it can really help us become a lot more happy and successful people. All right. So I know we're running a little bit short on time, so we'll go ahead and skip through some of this stuff for now. I want to make sure we cover all of our strategies here, and then if there's time at the end, we can go back and answer questions and try a couple quick activities. Item number 6 here, apply trusted problem-solving strategies. Now, if you're interested in STEM, you're probably interested in solving problems. And there's some really important tools that you might be able to use here that I'd like to introduce you to. This is one of my favorite tools, this problem-solving process from Tony Robbins. And this is sort of a more general problem-solving process, not necessarily specific to STEM, but it could still absolutely work. And basically, your job is to identify what problem you have and then follow these 5 steps. First step, what is great about this problem? And you might say, well, my problem is I'm struggling with my calculus class. Well, what's great about that? Well, at least you're in calculus class. You get to take calculus class. You have resources available to help. Maybe your professor offers extra credit. There's always going to be something that is great about your problem, even if your problem itself is terrible. Second question, what is not perfect yet? And then look what you do. You say, what am I willing to no longer do in order to make things the way I want? And what am I willing to start doing in order to make things the way I want? And so basically looking at your problem and saying, okay, well, how do I make this the way I want? What do I stop doing? Maybe I start managing my time more carefully. Maybe I stop beating myself up if I get a question wrong. Maybe I try to adopt that growth mindset. Maybe I reach out for tutoring. There's things that you can do to try to make things the way you want. And then I love this last part. How can I have fun along the way? Right? Because if there's not something positive and enjoyable about the whole process, then why bother? So really great tool. I encourage you to try this next time you come across a problem, even if it's not STEM related. It might help you think of some new ideas and new approaches to solve it. Another one, this is a fun one, 5 whys. So this is actually a real problem solving technique that is used in manufacturing. It's used often to find the underlying root cause of a problem that happened. So this is a true strategy used in like manufacturing, engineering type environments. And the idea is you keep asking why 5 times or as many times as you need in order to find the root cause. So let's just walk through a quick example of 5 whys. So suppose you have a student who is struggling in a class. So the student is struggling in their class. And so you could ask, well, why were the students' homework and test scores low? And you might say, well, the student didn't understand the material. Okay, well, why didn't they understand the material? And, oh, well, the student didn't ask for help. Okay, well, why didn't the student ask for help? Well, the student didn't come to class. Okay, so you see what we're doing here. We keep asking why, right? So next one, why didn't the student come to class? Well, the student can't wake up that early. Yeah, I get it. That's hard, right? So they couldn't wake up that early. Well, why not? Well, the student went to sleep late. Okay, why did they go to sleep late? Well, they had to work and then they had a bunch of homework. Oh, that's tough. Why did they have to work? There's a lot of homework. Oh, well, they're taking 24 units of classes. Oh, well, why are they taking so many classes? Well, the student thought they could fit everything in their schedule. Well, why did they think they could fit it on the schedule? And now you realize, well, wait a minute. Maybe the root cause of my problem isn't necessarily not understanding the material. Maybe the root cause of my problem is that the student needs to improve their time management. So see how the 5 whys can really help you narrow down and figure out what might be actually causing your problem. All right, and last one, this is another one that comes from actual engineering. It's called structured problem solving. And the idea here is that you're looking at different possible root causes. So the idea is you make a table And you basically list every possible root cause for your problem. And then you write down all the data that's for or against the possible root cause. And the idea is that you gather data and you narrow down, and it's kind of like a little bit of detective work. You identify, okay, based on my data, well, this is not likely to be the root cause, but over here, poor study habits, well, based on this data, maybe this is a root cause, right? So basically you go through and you compare evidence for, evidence against, and you ultimately eliminate all the root causes until you find a solution. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and skip this. I know, Zaira, you did also want to send out a quick feedback survey to everybody, right? Do you want to maybe put that link in the chat one more time, just in case people have to drop off?
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. Okay. So the link for the feedback survey is in the chat right now. We also have the first year experience YouTube channel link as well if you want to go back and rewatch this video. This video will not be uploaded until tomorrow morning, just to let y'all know, but it will be on the YouTube channel. And again, for students who want to do, who are doing this for credit, make sure to submit the feedback survey. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, so yeah, we'll go ahead and finish up with our last strategy here. And then we can go back and answer any other last questions that students might have in the Zoom. So then the last thing to consider here, the last success strategy that I'd really like to emphasize is to enjoy the journey. All of us can power through and work crazy long hours for a period of time, but eventually we're going to run out of willpower and burn out. And everybody's different. Some people are really amazing and they can work really, really hard for a really, really long time before they burn out. But others, depending on you personally and how much willpower you have, you may not be able to go as long. And the thing to note here is that willpower is finite. Now there's a whole bunch of research done on this that's fascinating, but it turns out that you need to find healthy, positive ways to recharge. You need to find those ways to restore your willpower so that you can continue to work hard towards your goals. And everybody needs those healthy, positive ways to recharge. Everybody's different, but find what works for you. Find ways to give back, help others. Because at the end of the day, often people will find that's really what ultimately makes you happy, is not you yourself having a career and wealth and success, but also giving back and helping others. This is another good one, work to fun ratio, right? Goes back to the whole willpower idea, but make sure you have a balance. And gratitude, really key. And I like to end with this last point as well, that careers are important. We all want to be successful. We all want to leave some sort of positive impact in whatever we're spending the majority of our time doing. But for most people, careers are not necessarily the fundamental purpose in life. And most people do find meaning ultimately in other places, in family, friends, relationships, experiences, whatever it is for you. And so I also like to remind everybody that at the end of the day, succeeding in STEM certainly is important, and it's an excellent goal to have. And, I think it's really great that everybody's here and interested in STEM, but don't lose sight of all the other stuff that's important as well. And, make sure you do take time to enjoy the journey and find ways to make it enjoyable, even when, the journey is kind of in a rough patch, right? At the end of the day, often looking back in the times when you struggled, sometimes those memories can be often very rewarding and very comforting in reflection, even if during the time they were actually quite challenging. All right. So I really hope that these 7 strategies were helpful to everybody. And so I know we'll try to end here with a few minutes left in case there's questions. But really key takeaways is that, STEM is challenging. We're not here to deny that. And at the end of the day, you have to put in a certain amount of time, certain amount of effort in order to actually be successful. But be kind to yourself. You don't have to be alone in your journey. There are people and resources available to help. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I still struggle with these exact challenges and strategies. Just getting a degree is not going to make the challenges go away. But learning these tools and learning what works for you is going to vastly improve your chances for success. And I also encourage you to try these resources here at DVC. There's actually an incredible amount of stuff. Like Zaira pointed out, I didn't even know that first year experience YouTube channel existed. but like there's lots of really good stuff at DVC available. Also, the Math and Engineering Center, they're revamping that. There's a lot of great resources over there. There's lots of tools and resources you can use as a starting point to help yourself head in a better direction. And so I'll go ahead and leave it with that. I'm happy to answer questions with whatever time is left here. And I'll work with Zaira to make sure that these slides do get sent off to those who joined via Zoom in case you'd like to refer back to these.
All righty. Thank you so much, Ashley or Dr. Erickson, with this amazing workshop here. Like Dr. Erickson said, y'all, if you have any key takeaways, this right here, this is a great slide to look at, to refer to. Take advantage of the resources we have here. STEM is not, or make sure that you take time for yourself, because, you know, although we know that you want your work to be your everything, you have to also make sure that you are taking those breaks and taking that me time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead.